Um, Super excited to have everybody here with us on Data Sharks. Today we're going to be talking about something that we've been waiting for a while that we're excited to discuss. We're interviewing the CEO of Trualty.
That's great. 0 to 1. I'm ready for the questions.
0 to 1. So let's give a little bit of and I did get a lot of messages from folks like, did you change companies? You know, what's happened?
I've gotten the same, Jared. I've gotten questions from people. Did Jared change jobs? Is that what's going on?
No, it's just we didn't have enough going on, so we decided to spin a few more plates.
Yes. You know, it's a 3-ring circus. So, you know, if Cirque du Soleil can do it, why can't Jared?
Exactly. So we've created Truelty, which we're really excited about, and we'll talk about it today, and just talk about kind of what brought us to it, and needing to do this, and we'll give it a little bit of a history. So let's describe the problem first, so Arcady, tell us, like, what are some of the problems that we were encountering that sort of got this in our heads?
So almost 10 years ago now, we were focused on solving data science problems. So one of the problems that we were focused on solving is customer lifetime value. So customers came to us and said, we've got all of this transactional data. We want to get better at marketing, targeted marketing. And so we want to understand, how do we understand who our best customers are? And there's quite a bit of science behind this. There's work that's been done at Wharton. There's work that's been done even before that helps with predictive customer lifetime value. So it's not the same CLV that everybody does, which is take average sales by category or by segment, divide it based on transactions and get a number. This actually does it at the customer grain.
Right.
And that's where the problem is. Because we need to know that this is an individual customer, we have to be able to take Jared Hillam, Jay Hillam, and all the permutations of how you might appear across systems. It might be an e-commerce system. It might be a brick and mortar store. It might be a marketing system in which you appear. It might be a mobile app in which you appear. And the problem is, we would have 5 Jareds in the data set.
Yep.
And so when we run a CLV calculation, if we don't solve the problem, we don't know that Jared is actually the same individual across all 5 of these individuals.
Right.
And so that's where the problem starts. Anytime you want to do true data science, you want to do true modeling, machine learning, predictive modeling, regression modeling, you've got to have good data. And this is no exception.
Yeah, and I would even say, just in your day-to-day analytics, you know, like if you were to ask how many customers we have, just a basic ask from that.
How many customers, how many vendors, how many items, how many, you know, and whatever that might be, we don't know, because a lot of times the data is duplicated across multiple systems, especially if you're a multinational, or if you're running multiple ERPs, multiple marketing systems, multiple CRMs. Those are all examples. And it's not a problem of master data management. It's a very different problem in that we're not looking to collapse the records into one golden record. We want to know that there are 5 versions of Jared and they all represent the same individual. I don't want to eliminate the knowledge of where and which systems you've come from, because I still want to be able to understand that data. And so I need to be able to, and here's the term that we'll use, I need to do identity resolution. I need to resolve to know that Jared Hillam is the same individual across 5 or 10 or 20 records in the way that you might appear across those systems.
I was explaining this to a friend of mine, because he had seen this LinkedIn update, and he's like, you know, like, why would you have multiple versions of you? And you know, ultimately, when you think about your interaction with an organization, you know, you're interacting with a lot of channels, and the presumption that everybody makes is that these channels sort of all come together at some point. Well, they do, but they don't necessarily auto merge you. You know,
That's right.
There's no magic there that says that, oh yeah, this is the same person. And that's really what Truelty is it's doing that, you know, auto merge, not necessarily collapsing the records, but showing that, the version of you that called the call center and the version of you that, interacted with the ad is the same person. Right. And he was like, well, I didn't even realize that those were like completely different systems or stored in separate data systems. So this, this is, and this is a problem that, is basically pervasive across every organization. They all have to deal with this problem, no matter how you're going at it. And the thing is that, if you look at this at an individual level, which is the way to look at it to understand the problem, that you can kind of imagine, multiple versions of a person. But now think about it in like what the real world looks like, which is just a bunch of data. It's just a bunch of records, and you don't know, like, it's all jumbled together. It's a whole bunch of people jumbled together in the record set, especially once you bring all those records together. And so it really is like trying to find a bunch of needles in a haystack. And who is this person, and how do I identify our unique individuals within all of these interactions we've had in data.
Yeah, and we'll touch on the derivation of Truelty and what's behind the name and sort of what the overall vision is. But you're absolutely correct. I think the challenge that exists today is that we are no longer brick and mortar. The world has changed. We've got mobile. We've got other ways that people will interact with us. We hire third-party companies to go out into the marketplace and help us generate customers and generate activities. We've got our own internal marketing teams. And from a CFO, CEO, CMO perspective, the accountability is, are my marketing programs effective? That's one side of this equation. The other side of this equation is, am I in compliance? So that's the other big driver that's pushing this forward. It's Gdpr and Ccpa, because the challenge that we have is I have the right to say that I no longer want to be marketed to. And the problem that happens as a result of that is that you need to be marked as not to be marketed to.
Yep.
But you as an individual may appear in 3 different CRM systems because of how you've interacted with our company.
Right.
And so the challenge is, I want to be in compliance. I want to do the right thing, but I don't know that Jared exists in multiple places as personas that might not be all with the same email address or all with the same first name and last name spelled exactly the same because of how the data happened to be captured at the time. And so
wasn't that one of our first? That was one of our first deployments, right?
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was done for a major cruise line, and the challenge was big marketing system was being used, multiple CRMs, because there are multiple cruise lines that operate under the same parent holding company. But you as Jared, who wants to go on a cruise, may have taken cruises with all of the 3 brands or 2 of the brands. Right. And you also might have interacted with mailing campaigns and maybe, phone calls or emails. And so you might appear 10 or 20 times across those systems. And so when you ask a question or you make a request to no longer be sent an email, I can't simply, but you're still receiving emails through your other email. You think we didn't do our job properly. We have, but because you appear multiple times, we haven't marked all the records as those that should not be marketed to.
Right. And that is, I've been dealing with another website, which will not be named, but it is very annoying, very annoying. Yeah. You try to unsubscribe and they just keep going and keep going, so, and if I remember correctly, they were trying to do this by hand. So they had like an army of people trying to like hand find these folks in various systems to determine where they live.
So the process today is, all of us are living through this. You get prompted with a cookie preference and what your preferences are. Part of the capability that those vendors also provide is the ability to unsubscribe. And so that will generate the signal that comes in. And then there's a group of human beings, smart, capable human beings, who are relegated to doing searches, phonetic searches and sound X searches across databases to see if because all they want to do is comply. They want to listen to your request. Every single company, certainly every company we work with, wants to be in compliance. But the challenge is it's not as easy as the individual who's asking to unsubscribe thinks, because you may be in a third-party marketing system, you may be in a CRM system, you may be in multiple CRM systems, you're in an ERP system that refreshes nightly and then pushes your contact details back into the CRM and updates and maybe updates your preferences. So there's lots going on there, and that certainly is a challenge that Truelty solves today.
Right, and then of course the other one is the cost of that marketing event. Like if you actually are sending out mailers, and where each mailer costs, I don't know, $1 or less. They send nice stuff. So when you're sending stuff out to folks, and you do have duplicates, does this help with that situation?
Absolutely. And really, it again brings us back to that customer lifetime value question,
Right.
because ultimately where the CLV calculations come from, they come from mailing houses. So it was expensive to mail catalogs. And what people would do is they would want to understand, who are my customers who are likely to purchase, so that I don't send catalogs to individuals that are not likely to buy from me. And so we would want to do calculations with recency, frequency, monetary amount. And so what Truelty does through the identity resolution engine is provides marketers an opportunity to see that Jared is represented as 5 individuals in various systems, and I will only send you 1 catalog instead of 5.
Right. So, and then, the amount of new data you're getting as an organization, like new onboards of customers, as well as new just, data sets that come through, this helps with that too, right? Because as you're onboarding these new customer names or new customers individually, you're able to attribute whether you've done business with them before in the past, or whether these are people that are completely new to your organization.
That's a great point, because marketing and third-party organizations that are doing lead gen campaigns out there, they're constantly bringing into the funnel new customers, new prospects that might be interested in working with us. Some of those prospects are brand new. Some of those prospects are already in our system, and they happen to click on subscribe, not the unsubscribe, but to subscribe to a campaign. And so now we've got to update all of those 5 or 8 records that you're back. You said you want to be marketed to again. And so it's absolutely critical that you have this funnel of whether it's leads coming in or existing prospects that are already in your system. The other side of it is, the national do not call list, and being able to leverage that as well as part of that process. Because again, you may have phone number only on 1 of the records, or maybe on 2 of the records, but you might have unsubscribed only on 1. So reconciling against the DNR list is also important, the DNC list.
One of the things that has become very interesting, and it's the things that we've seen as Truelty, is a lot of folks are reaching out to us, wanting to partner with us because they do activation, right? So these activation partners are very, very interested in us. Can you speak to a little bit about activation, in terms of what it is and why Truelty is a fit for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, the activation process is about reaching out to the individuals and then measuring the response rates that you're getting from that reach out. And reach outs can be in a number of different modalities. It could be email, it could be SMS, it could be a mailing piece that gets sent out to you, and you are measuring the effectiveness of those activations. So the activation is the sending out of the campaign, but it's more importantly the response and the segmentation work that we'll do afterwards. So when you're activating and you're sending an email to 5 versions, I keep picking on you, Jared, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
5 versions of Jared, and only 1 response. Is that a success? So I've gotten 1 out of 5 to respond to me. And so the challenge is I'm doing one of 2 things. I am bombarding you with 5 messages that are identical, and you get annoyed. The other issue is that I am sending a message to one, you're responding to it, but I think my campaign is only 1/5 as effective as it is. And so having a clean list of who I can activate to becomes very, very important. And that's why activation vendors are absolutely excited about this. And we'll talk about sort of how this fits into CDP. Does it replace CDP? Those kinds of questions. But for activation vendors, having a clean prospect list is important. And that's what Truelty provides. It provides a clean list.
So this is obviously not a new issue. We've been dealing with this issue for well over 20 years. So, how is it that organizations have been, dealing with this problem in the past versus, well, how have they been dealing with this in the past? Let's focus on that.
Today, what organizations have to do is they have to take data from their CRMs, take data that is part of their marketing list, and give it to someone. Give up your data, give up your customer data, send it across to another organization to clean it up, and perhaps to enrich it as part of the process, but clean it up. And so this process of giving up PII data, giving up your customer data, and giving it to a third party is how organizations do this today. They take their data and sign extensive contracts to protect it.
I would guess, yeah.
But they have to give up that data. And so that, unfortunately, is the world of today. This is how it happens today.
I'm sure there's some really nice insurance policies that get written up for these kinds of things. Just liability insurance.
Yeah, it's the challenge is obviously data breaches, but even if we are fully protected from data breaches, the issue that we are able to solve is not only the fact that Truelty does not take the data, does not ever see customer data, does not even see prospect data, does not see any data whatsoever other than metadata. How much have we processed? How many records were duplicated, and those kinds of things. Truelty runs entirely in a customer environment, customer owned environment.
Nice.
And so as a result, you don't have to send the data out. That, I think, is the 10% of the value. 90% of the value is that it's your data that you can now use as part of your analytics platform, as part of your data science platform, as part of your pipeline, so that you can do more with this data, because it doesn't leave your organization. It stays in your own data centers, in terms of your cloud provider, your chosen cloud provider that you're using.
Yeah, and I can imagine that if you're having this sort of interaction, that's sort of this back and forth situation, you're probably, the snapshots you're taking. This reminds me of the really early data warehousing days. The snapshots that you were taking are probably daily, weekly, whatever your contract kind of agreement is, but it's probably pretty sporadic in terms of how quickly you're going to be able to resolve, new records and whatnot.
That's the other side of it. It's the scalability of this challenge. So one is you're packing it up. So think about the process. You've got to pack up your data. You ship it off to a provider. The provider has to unpack it. They have to load it into their systems. They have to conform it to their structure, their schema. They will run the process. Then they give you a file back. And then you've got to figure out what to do with that file. And so it's a back and forth process that's not only error prone, but there are people that have a full-time job managing this life cycle.
So this kind of brings us to Snowflake, and just, because Truelty is built on Snowflake. Why did Snowflake act as a place for that to happen?
So obviously, the history and your involvement with sort of managing the ecosystem. Scalability is big. Running code natively. We're a Python shop, and so running code natively on the environment was very, very important for us. I think the other big thing is we've already built multiple projects that ran on Snowflake very successfully to solve this particular problem. And so it was natural to turn this into, rather than a service, turn this into an engine, into a product that people can deploy in hours versus having to engineer, architect, stand up architecture. Truelty today can be deployed literally in hours.
Yeah. In and I look back at the past projects that Intricity had done on this. There's at least 3 implementations that we had done on identity resolution native to Snowflake, which I think was probably a big piece of this. Is, look, we already have it here. We've shown that we've proven it can be successful. We've proven we can, kind of make this happen without having to go outside of, shipping data and whatnot. So let's just talk about, the actual solution itself. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the architecture of it, how it's composed, or put together to make all this happen where it's processing locally and whatnot?
Yeah, and I would say maybe just before we get there, just sort of the vision of Truelty. So Truelty is a combination of 2 words coming together: true loyalty. The idea is ultimately to be able to manage loyalty or loyalty-like programs, because you've got access across brands and you can do segmentation, you can do data science. There's lots of exciting things that you could do. But today, this application is code as a service, if you will. And so if you already are a Snowflake customer, or you can plug in a credit card number and create a trial account in about 5 minutes, that is all that it takes to stand up the environment. We deploy the code and we provide an instrumentation plane, an app that runs in the web, in your browser. And so what that app does is it interacts with your Snowflake environment to have a set of control tables. How many records have I processed? How many tables have I defined? What are the column definitions? So we'll run data profiling there. But the entire platform runs in your own Snowflake instance. And so you could deploy Snowflake to Azure, AWS, or GCP. And so, if you already have a Snowflake environment, we simply provide the scripts necessary to run this in your own Snowflake instance.
And so it is interacting with your Snowflake. This app is interacting with your Snowflake instance. So can it see the data? Like, is the app see the data?
So we do not see any data whatsoever other than the metadata, how many records were processed and those kinds of things. And that metadata is stored in the customer's Snowflake environment. So they can see what we see, because all of those tables are open to them. The data that the customer brings, the only thing we will see is the column names and what those columns represent and what the definitions are of those columns, but we don't see any data whatsoever.
Which means, there's no crazy, you don't have to have a trust model on whether we're going to be careful with your data, because we're not even seeing it to begin with.
That's right. It's not data does not leave your environment, and that is a very important point. We don't move data anywhere, and that's the other important part of this. Is you have an instance where you manage the data, you manage the files, you manage the tables that you would like to run identity resolution on. That can come from CRM systems, that can come from a variety of platforms. It doesn't even have to be customer data. You could do identity resolution, as we talked about, on vendor data or other types of data. But you're absolutely correct. It's a zero trust model, because we assume and you see that we don't have any access to anything other than the metadata that we deploy to your Snowflake instance.
And then, does it, from the perspective of administration and whatnot, does all of this processing live with, mixed with all the other processing that your organization's doing, or, how do you manage that piece?
Great question. So it's a separate set of compute, but it's also segregated. So when you deploy the Truelty application into your Snowflake instance, we create roles. And again, you see the scripts that are executed on your Snowflake environment. You can review them ahead of time. You can audit them. There's nothing hidden in that process. And so as a result, we will generate a role under which it will run. And so all of the queries and all of the processing can be segregated. So if somebody is looking at history or looking at other things, they're not having to see all of the activity that's going on. But it does run in your Snowflake environment. And so it is all together, but segregated from a perspective of logical separation, certainly not physical one.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because I mean I've seen the query history of one of these runs, and it's a blizzard of queries. There's a lot of things going on, and putting that in the history could be a little confusing for some administrators.
Yeah, and this is a challenging, identity resolution is a mathematically challenging problem. And so we approached it from a data science, from a science perspective. How do we solve this problem? Because the challenge is if you have 1,000 records, you have to do 1,000 squared, a little bit less than that, 1,000 times 999 comparisons if you're doing this via brute force. And there's some today, you asked how people do this. If they have really small data sets, they might take 10,000 records and just compare them one to each other and do those kinds of comparisons. We do a much smarter thing in that what the application does on Snowflake is 90% of the code actually will execute on extra small nodes. So it does not use a lot of compute. But more importantly, we manage to scale out and scale up based on the volumes of records that you process. And you probably will talk about timing. How long do the records take to process? But that's the thing that changes yet again the reason why this is so different. This processes and can be run several times a day, every 15 minutes if you so choose, because it is incredibly efficient.
So tell me what the end result looks like. So, okay, so I've ran this thing. What am I going to see?
You want the simplifying complexity. You want the intricity version of the process. So it's really simple. You give us data that is duplicated. You've combined it from multiple systems into one big table or a set of big tables that you would like to run identity resolution on. What we will do is we will add a column at the beginning of that table that provides you the Truelty ID. And so if you've got 1 billion records that you've processed and you have, let's say, 49% of the records are identity resolved and show up as duplicated. Let's take the Jared Hillam example. You appear 5 times in the data set. The keys that correspond to Salesforce, your SAP instance, your NetSuite instance, your marketing system, those IDs are kept so we can always crosswalk and walk our way back. But we add an additional column that gets assigned a consistent Truelty ID in the front. And that ID is the same across those 5 records. So when you run a join, you now know that Jared appears 5 times. You can very quickly see how many duplicated records you've got because you can count the number of times that ID appears in your data set because we do assign a consistent ID as part of the identity resolution process.
So okay. So you said that 90% of the compute is extra small. Is that something that is sort of a fixed? You've got fixed processes that say, okay, I'm going to allocate all these 90%, or is it kind of deciding this as it goes along?
It's the latter. So we've got an algorithm that knows how to scale up, how to scale across, and also scale up. And just to define what is extra small, somebody who might be listening to us today may not be a Snowflake customer, so they don't know what the sizing even indicates. In Snowflake, compute is defined in t-shirt sizes. So it starts with extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and so on. And the extra small is the smallest unit of compute that's available in Snowflake for 1 credit. And so, and billing in Snowflake is per second after the first minute. So the idea of running on extra small nodes gives us, and we've done a lot of engineering work to make this happen by packing data very tightly, by packing micro partitions to be very specific. We are doing a lot more in an extra small node than most people do when they run Snowflake. And so all this means in plain English is it's incredibly cost effective. So for arguably it might be $3.50 an hour. And so if we're able to run in extra small for half an hour, it's half that price. So you're paying for identity resolution, less than $2.
So a lot has been made of because in talking with the engineers on the Truelty engine, a lot has been talked about with asynchronous processing. And it's interesting because as we were attending the summit, I was really shocked at how few people really understood asynchronous inside of Snowflake. So I think it makes a little bit of sense if we can talk a little bit about that. What does it mean to run these queries asynchronously, and how does that impact this? Because Truelty takes full advantage of asynchronous processing in Snowflake. What does that exactly mean, and how does it impact the process in the query?
So it's no different if you're familiar with multiprocessing in the way that CPUs process data. The query engine, the compute, the extra small node that we are referring to in Snowflake is the warehouse. That's the technical term inside the Snowflake ecosystem. That warehouse is providing capability to run compute, to run SQL on those on those nodes that are doing the processing. If we're submitting queries synchronously, we're lining up in a queue and waiting to be served. First in, first out. Sort of like you line up at the movie theater, if we're still able to go to movie theaters these days. And so you're waiting until the person in front of you is already has already been served. In an asynchronous mode, we know and we're able to calculate how we can saturate that compute so that it's working at 98% capacity. You're paying for that second. You're paying for that minute,
whether you use it or not. You're paying
whether you use it or not.
Right.
And so Snowflake's nodes are multi-threaded, which means we can submit multiple requests at the same time, and they will get, instead of queued, they will get processed in parallel. So async is the ability to serve multiple requests at the same time. So we're saturating the compute node. We're getting more processing out. All it means is we're saving customers money, but also saving time and being very efficient in the way that we're leveraging the Snowflake ecosystem.
Yeah, it was interesting talking with one of our engineers about async, and one of the things he told me, he said, Jared, the thing about async is that the application, the Python, if you will, it's in control of the queries.
That's right.
It's sort of like, Snowflake has this sort of standard mode that everything goes through, and where everything kind of runs in sequence. But when you're going to run this via the Python application, you're given basically the keys to the kingdom in a way, and they're saying, look, you're running this and you're in charge of these queries. So it's probably not for the faint of heart in terms of the people that the amount of people that could understand how to run async is probably smaller than probably a small audience out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people understand parallel processing, and that the fact that, if you're standing at a counter, you want to get served in parallel rather than in serial. Same thing with these queries. It's just, again, Truelty's responsibility is, as a solution that's powered by Snowflake, it has to mean something. It has to, these last 8 years or so, that experience and all the things that we've done in being able to manage very large deployments for customers, we've learned a lot, obviously, about the ecosystem. And all of that has been brought to bear as part of the Truelty identity resolution solution. And there's obviously a lot of exciting things in terms of Snowpark and running Python natively and doing a lot more things. So there's certainly a lot more to come on the Truelty roadmap.
So on the benchmark of it, how many records are getting processed when you're running it typically, for like 1 million records, what's our duration?
We're about 6 to 9 seconds per million records.
Wow. Okay.
So we're able to process about 1 million records every 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds.
Less than 10. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, when you're talking billions of rows, it's really significant that you can get that much throughput.
And that's really the key. We're no longer dealing with small data sets. So 250 million records, 1 billion records, 10 billion records. These things can be done in real time. And so there's a lot of excitement when you're able to take not just 10,000 records and process, but we have customers that are talking to us about 100,000 records, and those who are talking about to us about 10 billion records. And so obviously, Truelty can run in all of those use cases.
Yeah, one of the things that I think one of the innovations is a little bit on the licensing side, because this world is very, per record centric. What's different on that front?
So as we spoke to customers, and also how we have always conducted ourselves, what's the right thing to do? How do we simplify complexity? What's the right thing to do? And so the approach that we've taken with Truelty Identity Resolution Solution is that a customer buys an annual license to run Truelty on their Snowflake instance, and it's a set cost irrespective of the number of records that they've got.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, pretty much everybody out there is charging a per record fee, which makes it so
and they're charging for storage, and they're charging for moving data, and they're charging for onboarding data, and they're charging for all of those kinds of things. Again, the problem of identity resolution is a really, really important problem. And so Truelty focused on building the engine. We today don't do anything other than identity resolution. And where our focus will be, I mentioned roadmap, where our focus will be is analytics that are related to being able to do identity resolution. So it's predictive customer lifetime value. It's being able to do segmentation work. It's being able to do the data science that we want to do on this data, customer journey, customer marketing effectiveness. All of those kinds of things become possible, but the customer owns the data. That means that they can take their existing data warehouses and use the identity resolved schema to run analytics along with their transactional data immediately after they've done identity resolution, because it's co-located with the rest of their data. They can run queries against transactional data after the identity, as I said, after the identity resolution step is done.
Right. So where do you want to take it? Like what are some of the directions you want to take the Truelty? What are some of the features you're excited about that are coming down the road?
So essentially, this enables, instead of being locked into a hard-coded CDP, this enables CDP as a service, and you could choose best-of-breed capabilities. You could choose an activation vendor, and Truelty has partnered with 3 activation vendors already. You could choose to run analytics with another third party. Maybe you have already a data science team that you're working with. Where we would like Truelty to be today is enabling all of your identity resolution needs. Tomorrow, we are certainly focused on loyalty, because loyalty is side by side with identity resolution. We're focused on doing data science type capability, applying data science capabilities and enabling those inside of your Snowflake account. And so
this is going back to the 10-year-old problem you were trying to solve.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. You and I have talked about this. A startup, it takes 10 years for an idea to all of a sudden be the idea that's adopted. So this one has been incubating for at least that long.
So the idea here would be that somehow in that first party identity resolution, that within that set you could also identify customers, for example, that would have a propensity to be loyal.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I would be able to tell who is likely to come back next month and buy. So we do this today in non-contractual settings. So this is someone who's not a cable subscriber or a mobile phone subscriber, because that's a contract that you sign for a year. But casual relationships, such as the ones that I am an e-commerce customer, I'm a brick and mortar customer, who are my best customers and how likely are they to come back? Today, we're able to do that with much more precision because I now know that Jared is one individual and not 5. So all of that work that's been done now can be surgically precise instead of just being directionally precise.
Yeah, and I would imagine that just with some of the announcements that were made in the last summit with Snowflake, that there's going to be a lot of. I kind of get this impression there's going to be a lot of sort of applications that get generated on Snowflake, and many of which may have this underlying assumption that, hey, I am going to need some customer data that's clean or that has been identified, the duplicates have been identified. So I can imagine just even from a partnering perspective, you're going to have a lot of situations there, just cross tying their analytics with the unique Truelty ID that Truelty has.
Yeah, and for first-party data, I think there isn't anything closely resembling what Truelty is doing, but it doesn't preclude us from bringing in third-party data into the data set as well. So once if you've brought in that data, third-party data in before, so you've enriched it, you've paid for all of those records, running identity resolution cleans that up. So next time you go and resolve, you no longer have to be doing resolution on those records. Again, the data lives with you. You have it in your own Snowflake instance. And so that opens up a world of possibilities with how you use the marketplace. It opens up a world of possibilities of how you bring in data from your transactional systems, because the goal is to get a 360-degree view of the customer. And if all you've got is just identity, it's the first step in the customer journey.
Yeah, and I could imagine, just like you said, if you were going to start a third-party relationship with validating data against a graph, you could at least reduce the cost of that relationship by running this first and then sending to the third party, having them resolve against already deduplicated sets, so that you're not just overpaying. You're really paying just truly for all your unique records, not just paying a ton of money for something that isn't necessary.
And the elegance of this is in what you asked. What do you get after you run identity resolution? You get a column that guarantees that those records are part of the same cluster, to be technical about it. Do they belong to the same cluster? And so this process of canopying and the process of bringing up and striping the data and bringing the data across the multiple instances, that's the engine. But the end result is a very simple structure that is your data structure plus an additional column that gives you the insight into are they the same individual? And you could adjust how you do the matching. You can, some organizations prefer to be equal. Some organizations are okay if it's more of a fuzzier match and not necessarily an exact match.
Talk a little bit about the implementation process. So, like, let's say someone wants to buy it. What does that look like? Like, go through some of those details with us.
Certainly. So, a lot of customers are interested in trying it. So that process is also very easy. We can deploy the code to your instance. You can run it for a set number of records. But in terms of the onboarding process, if you already have a Snowflake instance, we run through a prep step, a code review step of what we will be deploying. It's a 2-page document that basically describes the process and what we bring in. What the customer needs to do, or the partner that's working with the customer needs to do, or Intricity can do, is provide the prep work to generate that one big table. Because ultimately, we need data that comes in. Let's say you've got 3 CRMs. You're going to have to bring in data from 3 CRMs, bring it all together, and then we can run identity resolution on that. That configuration happens in the Truelty HTML app. You define what your sources are. You define what the columns are like. We are leveraging everything that we can, squeezing every bit of processing that we can from Snowflake. So the first step is we will do a profile. We'll run a Snowflake profile on the data. to help you figure out, is this first name, is this last name, is this a PII column, is this a telephone number, is this an email address? And then you can tag those columns that are additional. Maybe the names don't or the data doesn't immediately jump out. And so you will define what the columns are that you want to run identity resolution on. You will mark columns as already cleansed. So if you've already done some third-party cleansing, maybe you've an email address, you've gone back and you've validated that it's a good email address. We'll use that as part of the engine's calculations, and you run the process. The only additional thing that the customer would have to do is, we do not, because we can't see the data, you run your own scheduler. So if your scheduler is Airflow, Prefect, Cron, whatever your scheduler is, you would run that. You would set up a schedule of how often you want the identity resolution process to run. If you choose, you can run it from a command line. So there's no requirement to have a physical scheduler in place. You could literally have an engineer trigger it, but normally customers will have an enterprise scheduler that would kick this off.
Got it. Okay. And how long does it, like, if let's just say you didn't want to pilot it, is it a day-long process to work together, or is it just like an hour?
So the process of setup is about an hour, maybe an hour and 30 minutes, especially if you've got the right folks on the call and prepared. Where the time goes is bringing the data from the source systems, and most customers have already done that, especially if they're shipping it to some third party. And the other side of the equation is, what do I do with it? Once I've done identity resolution, how do I use it? And so that's another side of the implementation. But for Truelty, and what Truelty is responsible for, it is the engine that resolves and does the identity resolution for you. And that process is certainly, less than 2 hours. We've done it in 45 minutes.
Okay. So the prep work prior to installing Truelty is, we need to be sure that we've centralized that data into Snowflake, right?
That's right.
And is that often a step that's already done? Or, you mentioned that if they've already started that, but what do clients need to do if that's not the case?
So there is a little bit of data engineering work. And again, as I said, either the internal team would produce that file if they haven't produced it yet, or that table if they haven't produced it yet. You would work with your existing partners who are helping you with your environment. You could work with Intricity to provide that. And so bringing that data together is really the first step. And that could be done using CDC tools like Fivetran and others, in terms of getting the data across into the Snowflake instance. Again, assuming you haven't done that already.
Right. Okay. So once I've got it, and most, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of Snowflake customers have already sort of taken this step of data centralization. But if you haven't, it's a good justification for, getting the organization on board and to getting the data in. So, all right. So I think that's most of my questions where I wanted to take it. If people want to get started, where do they go? How do they get access to the application?
It's Truelty.com. And you can ask to have a phone call. Happy to do a demonstration and get started. So welcome to those who are interested. We'll certainly follow up and help.
And one thing I just wanted to mention before we close it out too is, Snowflake mentioned in their summit that they're going to have these embedded apps and things like that. So that is one of the sort of the directives that Truelty is going after, is to make it so that you could, as easily as a few clicks, just have it working locally. That will be coming too. So even that 1 hour that it takes to do the setup will end up, getting reduced down to just a click. So.
That's right. We're definitely a solution that today runs 100% in Snowflake, and the deployment process will get easier as those capabilities become leave the private preview and become public.
Awesome. All right. Well, Arkady, thank you so much for taking time out to go over that with us. Folks, if there's interested if you're interested in looking at Truelty, it's truelty.com, and there's a demo button there. You can register to see a demo of it. And looking forward to chatting with you all soon. Thanks again, Arkady.
This was fun, Jared. Thank you.